Looking for magic cards? At flipsidegaming.com you can now use the promo code LVD to get a 10% discount on orders over $10 while supporting the channel at the same time. Hello and welcome to another episode of Spike Sunday, a weekly series where we take a look at established, standard or modern decks, and this week we're taking a look at 5-color humans in Modern, an aggressive, disruptive tribal deck that gets to play all 5 colors thanks to all the rainbow lands. So let's take a look at the entire deck list, starting out with our 1-drops, where we have 4 copies of Aether Vial, a 1-mana artifact, where at the beginning of our upkeep we can put a charge counter on Aether Vial, and then if we tap Aether Vial, we can put a creature card with convert mana cost equal to the number of charge counters on Aether Vial from our hand into play, which means we can play around counter spells with our Aether Vial since our opponent can't counter creatures put into play through Aether Vial. Also helps us play things at instant speed, which can catch our opponent off guard, and also plays around sweeper effects nicely since we can activate Aether Vial end of turn, for example. And also helps us with the different mana requirements in the deck, since we are playing all 5 different colors, so sometimes we get into some issues with our mana base, and Aether Vial kind of ignores the colored requirements of our creatures, so helps there as well. We also have some lands like Horizon Canopy that we want to sacrifice to draw cards in the late game, and then if we still have Aether Vial to play our creatures, we don't really need to worry about sacrificing lands as much. So Aether Vial just does a lot of great things for the deck, helping us get those very explosive starts where we get to empty our hand quickly by both using Aether Vial and by casting creatures with our lands. Next up we have 4 copies of Champion of the Parish, a 1-mana 1/1 human soldier. Whenever another human enters the battlefield under our control, we can put a +1/+1 counter on Champion of the Parish, so he's going to grow very quickly and deal a ton of damage for us. So starting our curve with the Champion of the Parish usually leads to very fast starts for the deck. Next up we have 4 copies of Noble Hierarch, probably the best mana dork ever printed, a 1-mana 0/1 human druid with Exalted, so whenever one of our creatures attacks alone it gets +1/+1 for each instance of Exalted we have until end of turn, and then the Noble Hierarch taps for green, white or blue mana, so also helps us accelerate out our more expensive creatures, giving us those very explosive starts that humans is capable of. Next up we have 3 copies of Thalia, the first disruptive element we've encountered so far. A 2-mana 2/1 legendary human with First Strike that says non-creature spells cost 1 generic mana more to cast, and of course our deck is filled with creatures, so we're not going to be bothered by the Thalia attacks ourselves. Next up we have 4 copies of Thalia's Lieutenant, a 2-mana 1/1 human soldier. When Thalia's Lieutenant enters the battlefield, we get to put a +1/+1 counter on each other human we control, so rewards us for going wide. And whenever another human enters the battlefield under our control, we get to put a +1/+1 counter on Thalia's Lieutenant herself, which is the same text as on Champion of the Parish. And Thalia's Lieutenant also plays very nicely with Aether Vial, since if we have a vial with 2 counters on it, we can play our Lieutenant at instant speed, letting us put counters everywhere, which can be very relevant in the middle of combat, or to save our creatures from a damage-based removal spell. Next up we have 3 copies of Phantasmal Image, the only non-human creature in the main deck, but it synergizes quite nicely with most of our creatures, since a lot of our creatures have Enter the Battlefield abilities, which means that when we copy them with Phantasmal Image, we also get to copy the Enters the Battlefield ability, and of course when the Phantasmal Image enters the battlefield as a copy of one of our creatures, it will still enter the battlefield as a human, which means it still triggers cards like Champion of the Parish or Thalia's Lieutenant. Next up we have Kitesail Freebooter, a 2-mana 1/2 flyer, giving us access to some hand disruption in creature form, so when the Freebooter enters the battlefield we get to look at the opponent's hand, and then we can choose a non-creature, non-land card from it, and exile it for as long as the Freebooter stays in play. Then we have 4 copies of Meddling Mage, which also plays nicely with our Kitesail Freebooter, a 2-mana 2/2 creature. As Meddling Mage enters the battlefield, we can choose a non-land card name, and spells with the chosen name can't be cast. So if we can take a look at the opponent's hand beforehand with a Kitesail Freebooter, we have a better idea what to name, and then whatever we name with the Meddling Mage, our opponent won't be able to play. It's also very powerful against certain combo decks. Next up we have Militia Bugler from M19, which fit in the deck perfectly as a 3-mana 2/3 human with Vigilance. When the Bugler enters the battlefield we get to look at the top 4 cards of our library and then reveal a creature card with power 2 or less from among those cards and put it into our hand, and the rest goes on the bottom, so it gives us access to more copies of certain cards that are important in certain matchups, and also helps us grind against the removal heavy decks by providing a creature that replaces itself. Then we have Reflector Mage, giving us access to some temporary removal in creature form, a 3 mana 2/3 human wizard. When Reflector Mage enters the battlefield, we get to return target creature an opponent controls to its owner's hand, and then that creature's owner can't cast spells with the same name as that creature until our next turn, which gives us a lot of time to attack with our humans and try to kill the opponent before they get to replay whatever we bounced. And last but not least, we have 4 copies of Mantis Rider, a 3 mana 3/3 human monk with flying, vigilance and haste, so it gives us access to a nice finisher in the air if there's ever a ground stall, and also combines nicely with the exalted triggers on Noble Hierarch, getting in for 4, maybe 5 damage if we control multiple Noble Hierarchs, and also letting us cast the Mantis Rider on turn 2, so we can be attacking for 4 damage on turn 2 if we start with a turn 1 Noble Hierarch. Then taking a look at our mana base, we've already mentioned the rainbow lands. We've got 4 copies of Ancient Ziggurat, which can only tap for mana when we cast creature spells, so we won't be able to play our Aether Vial with it, but everything else is fair game, and of course helps us cast all the 5 different colors in our deck. Then we also have 4 copies of Cavern of Souls, which is usually gonna name human in our deck, so not only does it tap for mana of any color when casting humans, it also makes them uncounterable, which is very relevant against certain control decks. And we also have 4 copies of Unclaimed Territory, which is also usually going to name human to have the same effect as Cavern of Souls, except for the uncounterable part. Every now and then you might name another creature type like Illusion to help you cast Phantasmal Image, or after Sideboard you have a few extra creature types in there, but the default choice should be human. Then we also have 4 copies of Horizon Canopy, which can tap for green or white mana, and we can also sacrifice it to draw a card if we're flooding out a bit. We have 1 of each basic island and basic plains, and then 1 Seachrome Coast, which comes into play untapped if it's one of our first 3 lands. Then taking a look at our sideboard, we have 2 copies of Gutshot, giving us some cheap interaction against 1 toughness creatures, 2 copies of Auriok Champion for when we need to gain some life, a Kataki, which is great against artifact-based decks, Direfleet Daredevil against decks with a lot of instants that we can flash back from their graveyard, 2 copies of Damping Sphere against Tron decks, Storm decks, and other combo decks, the 4th copy of Militia Bugler for the grindy matchups, 2 Reclamation Sage giving us answers to artifacts and enchantments, 2 Sync Collectors against decks with a lot of instants and sorceries that we can snipe out of the opponent's hand, and 2 Izzet Staticasters against tokens and decks with a lot of 1 toughness creatures. So that's the deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, we're on the draw, and we have a 1-lander with an Aether Vial in it, which is usually a keep, but it can go wrong if your opponent goes turn 1 discard spell. Instead it's an untapped Hallowed Fountain into Serum Visions. Alright, so probably dealing with a control deck where Aether Vial's pretty good, so we've got that going for us. A triple Reflector Mage, not as good. And if this is Jeskai control, that's definitely one of the worst matchups we can face. Alright, so can't do much here, have to say go. And it is Jeskai indeed with an opt-on of turn. Alright, so I definitely don't expect to win the match. Can maybe hope to steal a game. And Jace Strange Prodigy, alright, so our opponent's got an interesting take on the archetype, that's for sure. So Reflector Mage might not be a dead card after all, which is good. So we probably want to Aether Vial the Meddling Mage, naming a Lightning Bolt, and then play the Thalia's Lieutenant. Another opt-on of turn. So our opponent could already be transforming their Vryn's Prodigy here. And instead we see Jury and Rune Diver. Alright, so this is not Jeskai control at all. This is a completely different deck. And a Path to Exile on Meddling Mage. Alright. Let's get our basic island. And Jace is gonna transform, and we're gonna be in quite a bit of trouble already. Alright, let's put Vial up to 3 and draw a Noble Hierarch. Alright, so we've got a few options here. Ideally, we would like to kill Jace before they get to flashback their Path to Exile from the graveyard. And if we play Reflector Mage, then we ensure that our opponent doesn't get to block with Jorian, and also getting Jorian off the battlefield seems good. So we can Reflector Mage Jorian, and then file in the Mantis Rider, attack Jace for 5. That way they can't flash back the path from the graveyard. Ooh, Monastery Mentor into Mishra's Bauble. Well, luckily we've got all these Reflector Mages, which we thought were going to be dead cards. But instead now we get to bounce the Monastery Mentor, which is pretty nice. Jace pluses on Mantis Rider. We'll keep the Vial at 3. And Kitesail Freebooter, which we currently can't cast. So we can Reflector Mage Monastery Mentor, force our opponent to play any 1 mana card they have right now, which can inform our decision, and then maybe Reflector Mage a token as well. So I think we start by vialing in Reflector Mage on the Monastery Mentor. And our opponent did have a path for the Lieutenant, that's unfortunate. That's what we did not want to see. I think going Noble Hierarch into Lieutenant is probably the play now. Make our team bigger. And get another hit at Jace with our Mantis Rider. And we can take out Jace if we just attack with the Mantis Rider. That seems worth it. And that way we get to keep Reflector Mage for Jory N or their mentor on the following turn. Instead we see Erayo. So when they cast a 4th spell in their turn, they get to transform it into a legendary enchantment that essentially counters the first spell we play each turn. So definitely don't want that thing to transform. And there's a Mox Amber. It's gonna enable Prowess. So we know they have 2 3-drops in hand, so it seems unlikely that they get to enter their hand here. Erayo is also legendary, so Mox Amber taps for mana. And they Jace for Prodigy. And they can potentially play Lightning Bolt here, which could enable Prowess once again. And they're just gonna bolt the Lieutenant right now. And yeah, that actually transforms their Erayo since 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's impressive. Well, luckily we have this Aether Vial, which doesn't actually cast our spells. But yeah, that's gonna make things pretty rough. I guess we'll start by sacrificing a Canopy. And find Mantis Rider, that was a good one. So we can put Mantis Rider into play, attack with everyone. Or we can Reflector Mage the Jace, so they can't flash back more removal spells. That's probably better. So I think we can attack with everyone. And then vial in Reflector Mage to bounce the Jace. Over vialing in Mantis Rider here, since I don't want them to flash back a Path to Exile when they have Jory N and Monastery Mentor in hand. So let's attack. I doubt our opponent's blocking with the Jace. And I'm fine if they trade a Monk for a Noble Hierarch here. They're just gonna double chump. Take 5 down to 10. And put Reflector Mage into play, bouncing Jace. Alright, so our opponent's got 3 creatures in hand. And they're facing quite the board here. There's a Mentor, and our opponent scoops it up. Alright, so got there in the end, despite all the cheap removal spells. Alright, so how do we sideboard against this deck? I'm not sure what the opponent's sideboard plan is. Could include cards like Thing in the Eyes. So Staticaster cleans up the Mentor tokens, but that seems a little too reactive. I do like Sync Collectors. The Bugler is going to be okay, and the Daredevil should be okay as well. But I think that's it. So we've got 4 cards coming in. Reflector Mage, actually pretty decent, but I don't think we want all 4. So maybe cutting 2 copies is fine. I feel like Meddling Mage is going to be pretty weak if our opponent brings in more varied removal spells. They probably have some number of Lightning Helix besides Bolt and Path. Maybe they have Anger of the Gods, Electrolyze, you never know. So I think we'll try this. And yeah, this looks like an okay hand. Lots of 1-drops, double Champion of the Parish can lead to some quick starts. Opponent with a turn 1 Serum Visions. Let's play Champion over Noble, I think. And then next turn we can go Noble plus Champion, attack for 3. And there's Jace for Prodigy. And wow, we draw another Champion of the Parish. So we could go triple Champion start here. It's pretty tempting since we have a Thalia's Lieutenant coming up as well. I think we just go for glory. Alright, there's a Flooded Strand. Opponent's fetching pretty quickly here for the red source, so this looks like an Anger of the Gods incoming. No, instead it's just a Lightning Bolt into Lightning Helix maybe. Nope, Bolt, Bolt. Alright, fair enough. And now Jace gets to transform right away. Well, that was definitely a good turn 3 for the opponent. Meddling Mage on Bolt could have done a lot of work there. Alright, so that slowed us down significantly. What's our play now? I think I like Meddling Mage on Bolt. And we'll say go. Do they have a path as well? Nope, just an opt. If they have one of their 3 mana creatures here, we could also be in trouble. And there's a path. Well, at least we get to grab a land here. And our opponent says go with 2 mana up. So we can either Freebooter or Sync Collector here. I think I like Sync Collector plus Noble. So we'll play the Sync Collector first. And our opponent's holding double path plus Snapcaster, so yeah, this is gonna be a rough one. Play Noble. And we do get to attack Jace for 1 at least, thanks to Exalted. And the Snapcaster is not gonna jump in front. So the Snapcaster can flash back Path to Exile. But we have a decent turn incoming as well with Freebooter plus Lieutenant. So they're gonna path the Meddling Mage. Don't have any basics left in our deck, sadly. Yep, and now the Freebooter can't take the Snapcaster Mage. So unless our opponent drew into another instant or sorcery, the Freebooter's not gonna grab anything. So do we sacrifice the Canopy, or do we play the Freebooter anyway? Feels like we need to find one of our 3 mana plays here. Militia Bugler would help. Alright, there we go, speak of the devil. So I think we play the Canopy so we can attack with 1 with our Noble still. And find another Noble. So do we play the Noble or do we attack Jace for 1? Attacking Jace for 1 seems relevant when he's at 3 loyalty. Jace pluses on Bugler. We know they still have a Snapcaster in hand. And another Jace for his Prodigy. And there's an Aether Vial. Alright, so Snapcaster plus 1 unknown. Do we run out to Freebooter? Or do we sack another Canopy? Feel like we sacrifice the Canopy. And draw another one. So now we can play Freebooter, Vial plus Noble. Guess we'll start with the Freebooter here. And Supreme Verdict, that's actually a pretty good one to know about. So if our opponent goes Snapcaster Bolt on Freebooter, they get back their Supreme Verdict. So the problem here is that even if we kill Jace, our opponent has another Jace in play, so they just get to transform that one and start flashing stuff back. But on the other hand, we don't want our opponent to minus the first Jace and then minus the second Jace as well and get a ton of value. So I feel like we still want to pressure the opponent's Jace here. Play the Vial, say go. So don't love our position, but if we can chain together a few more Buglers, maybe find a Thalia, that can do a lot of work. Huh, I think our opponent messed up here. They didn't plus the first Jace on one of our creatures to shrink them down. So they minused on Bolt, killed our Kitesail Freebooter, and they also discarded a Wear Tear. So let's put a counter on the Vial. So now we know our opponent has Snapcaster Mage plus Supreme Verdict in hand. So those are both problematic cards. So they can Snapcaster Path to Exile on Militia Bugler here, for example. So let's start by sacrificing Canopy again. Find a Reflector Mage. So we could attack Jace with just a Bugler, or we can attack Jace with just a Noble Hierarch. That might actually be better. Since it still hits for 2, it still doesn't get blocked profitably by a Snapcaster, so it still forces the block plus opt or the Path to Exile, which is better than them killing the Bugler here, I think. And we don't want to commit more creatures knowing about the Verdict. So do they path the Noble? They do. Alright, so I think that was a good exchange for us. losing a Noble instead of a Bugler. And I think we'll just say go. So Jace shrinks Bugler. And another Jace, alright. And one Supreme Verdict in hand, so we have perfect information here. And a Thalia to draw. That's a big one. Thalia is important here, since if our opponent doesn't draw an untapped land, they won't be able to play the Verdict. And actually they're also missing double white, which I haven't realized yet. So our opponent's currently unable to cast a Verdict. So we can bounce Jace and then attack Jace with our Bugler, which will make it unable to flash back anything from the graveyard. So either way, we're playing this Reflector Mage, bouncing Jace, and then we can attack with our Bugler. For 1, we could vial in Thalia's Lieutenant here, and our opponent's actually chumping. Alright, so we'll let that happen. I think I'm okay just saying go for now. Alright, so they did find a fetch land, so now we definitely don't want to commit anything into a Supreme Verdict. So we can end of turn vial in Thalia if they cast a Verdict here. Instead they're going for Path to Exile. Interesting. Don't really see a reason to respond by putting in Thalia, since they can just pay the tax. And they have the basic planes. And there's a Verdict. Alright, that's fine. So their hand is another Jace. I think we go for Thalia since she hits a little harder. And we'll keep Violet too. And our opponent scoops it up. So perhaps a shame concede since they minus Jace instead of plussing it. What were we going to draw? Phantasmal Image. Alright, so we would have actually done quite a bit of damage here. So not sure what happened, but we got to win anyways. So on to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw, and we have a pretty awkward hand, in that we can't play our Aether Vial with our Ancient Ziggurat. Double Thalia, double Vial is also not very appealing. So what we could do is play our Hierarch with our Ziggurat, and then use Hierarch to play our Vial. But that's pretty convoluted to just get an Aether Vial in play. I don't think I like this hand. Alright, so not an amazing hand, don't have any of our 1-drops, but I think we'll keep. And Aether Vial on top is perfect. Exactly what we were looking for. And a tapped Overgrown Tomb, so some sort of green mid-range deck most likely. We get to play Vial on 1, which is nice. Blackleaf Cliffs, so our opponent's on Jund. So here we can play out Meddling Mage, which is gonna have to name one of the many removal spells in the Jund deck. Probably leaning towards Lightning Bolt, which is usually played more than Fatal Push. I guess the other consideration was naming Kolaghan's Command, since that can blow up our Vial and kill our Meddling Mage in one fell swoop. Instead they drew Dark Confidant for the turn, alright. So we might name Kolaghan's Command with a second Meddling Mage. We can play Meddling Mage, naming Kolaghan's Command, I think. Which is the most painful card right now. Attack with our Meddling Mage and then vial in our Lieutenant. Kind of hoping our opponent blocks, but seems unlikely. Alright, so I don't hate our spots. Opponent takes 2 from revealing Abrupt Decay, which is going to be decent since it can blow up one of our Meddling Mages. And our opponent's still stuck on 2 lands, apparently. Get to untap, put another counter on the Vial. Alright, so we can empty our hand here if we want to. So I think we'll start by playing the Bugler in case we find something we want to play instead of the Reflector Mage. And we find Kitesail Freebooter and Meddling Mage. They're both pretty good here. I'm not sure which is better. I think I'm gonna go with the Freebooter. And then I think I'm okay just filing in the Reflector Mage right now. Get rid of the Dark Confidant. Put a counter on the Lieutenant. And we'll see what our opponent wants to kill with the Abrupt Decay. Alright, they're gonna kill the one naming Lightning Bolt, which strongly indicates that they have a Lightning Bolt in hand, I guess. A Tarmogoyf would only be a 2-3 here, since there's no fetch land in the graveyard yet. And Lightning Bolt goes after Thalia's Lieutenant. And they're gonna Inquisition away the Freebooter. Find a Noble Hierarch, which doesn't do a ton for us here. So I think we can start by sacrificing the Canopy. Find another Freebooter. So we'll play the Hierarch. And attack for 7. So their opponent just struggling to empty their hand this game. Think they're gonna have a hard time coming back. And yep, that does it. Alright, so on to sideboarding against Junt. This is definitely where we want the 4th copy of Militia Bugler. And I think I like Darfleet Daredevil too, can flash back one of their removal spells. But I think that's it. Don't really see anything else I'm too interested in. And then what do we take out? Don't really love Meddling Mage in this matchup, since our opponent has such a wide variety of removal spells. As we could see there, it was pretty difficult to make a selection, while the Freebooter can just take whatever they happen to have in hand. And the flyer is also pretty relevant, since their opponent doesn't play any flyers themselves. So I think I like this. Alright, so we're on the draw. This hand isn't very good, but does get on the board quickly at least with all these Noble Hierarchs. So let's say our opponent opens with turn 1 Inquisition or Thoughtseize. They take the Image or the Reflector Mage, leaving us with a whole bunch of mana dorks. And then we have to top deck our way out of this. But if we mulligan to 6 and they have hand disruption, then it's not gonna get any better. So I think I'll keep, but I don't have high hopes for this hand. Could have also made the argument for boarding out our Aether Vials, since their opponent is playing Kolaghan's Command, which is pretty great against Aether Vial. But we just didn't have many great threats to bring in out of the sideboard to replace those Aether Vials. I don't think that's such a great idea. Opponent does take Reflector Mage, so we could see a turn 2 Tarmogoyf here. Let's name Human. Play Hierarch. Say go. Tapped Raging Ravine instead. And we could always just Phantasmal Image a Tarmogoyf as well. That's a valid play. Alright, Kitesail Freebooter is pretty exciting. So we can just play Freebooter plus Hierarch here. Seems fine to me. So let's see if our opponent has a Fatal Push they want to use here. They don't. And their hand is Lightning Bolt, Tarmogoyf, Bloodbraid Elf. So pretty good hand. But we do get to take their only non-creature spell here. And then we'll play another Noble over attacking for 1 here. I think that makes sense. And there's a Tarmogoyf, a 3/4, so pretty large. And another Unclaimed Territory, not a great draw. Alright, so I think we start by sacrificing the Canopy here. And Mantis Rider is not bad. So we can play Mantis Rider, attack for 5 if we just attack with the Mantis Rider. Or we can play around a top-decked Lightning Bolt and attack with both Freebooter and Mantis Rider, and then potentially miss out on 1 damage. I think I like maximizing our damage here and attack for 5 with the Mantis Rider. And then next turn we can maybe copy the Mantis Rider with Phantasmal Image. Alright, no Lightning Bolt, that's good. So we get to connect for 5, put them to 14, and next turn Phantasmal Image can copy the Mantis Rider to good effect if we can dodge a removal spell. And the opponent's land is a Treetop Village, so they're not guaranteed to be able to play Bloodbraid, but there's a fetch land. So their hand is Treetop Village, Bloodbraid, which they're going to play right now, plus 1 unknown card. And there's a Bloodbraid, revealing a Liliana, the Last Hope. That's a good one, can take out one of our nobles. Or shrink down the Mantis Rider. Probably just going to kill one of our nobles. So both attack, we'll take it. And our opponent's actually going to shrink down the Mantis Rider, interesting. And we drew another one, so we get to play both. So our opponent's decision of not killing a Hierarch definitely did not pay off in this instance. And I think copying a Mantis Rider is probably better than Tarmogoyf here. Do we just hit our opponent for 8, or do we take out Liliana? So if our opponent targets our illusion with Liliana, it's going to die next turn. But it's probably still worth it to just get in for as much damage as possible here. I think we just try and race and attack our opponent with everyone. and hope to dodge some sort of sweeper effect or a combination of removal spells. Alright, so our opponent attacked before plussing Liliana, so we do have the opportunity to block with our Illusion Mantis Rider, which otherwise might die to Liliana anyways. So our opponent has 3 top village and 2 unknown cards in hand. If those are removal spells, then we could be in a bit of trouble. But with the 3rd Noble, we actually have enough damage if we just attack with 1 Mantis Rider with 3 Exalted triggers. Of course, if our opponent has instant speed removal, then that doesn't work out. I think I might be okay blocking the Bloodbraid Elf here. So if something does go wrong, at least we bought ourselves more time to top deck out of it. And our opponent with a Kolaghan's Command, making us discard the last Hierarch. And so now they can Lightning Bolt the Mantis Rider. So they can wait until after we attack to kill a Mantis Rider here. Liliana shrinks down one of our Mantis Riders, and Thalia the draw. Alright, so if we play Thalia, we force our opponent to Lightning Bolt our 3/3 Mantis Rider essentially. Otherwise we would not get the benefit from the Exalted triggers. So I think I'm fine playing out Thalia. Force the Lightning Bolt on our 3/3 Mantis Rider. And then just attack our opponent for 3 here, putting them to 2. And then hoping to dodge another removal spell on Mantis Rider essentially. So our decision not to kill Liliana might have come back to bite us a little bit, so it might have been better to just take out the Planeswalker. But then of course Tarmogoyf would have also been a little bigger, which could have been relevant. And our opponent is at 2, so if they don't draw a removal spell for the Mantis Rider, they're just dead. Liliana's gonna minus to get back Bloodbraid Elf. So our opponent is spinning the wheel essentially, which might mean that they didn't have a cheap removal spell for the Mantis Rider in hand. So there's Bloodbraid, finds Tarmogoyf, which is not a removal spell for Mantis Rider. And there's already 2 Lightning Bolts in the graveyard, so not very likely that they have one in hand. And our opponent scoops it up, so our Mantis Rider gets there in the end. So I'm not sure if we should have been taking care of Liliana earlier, but the aggressive line got there just in time. Alright, on to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw, and I don't think we can keep a hand where we can't cast our Freebooters and where we don't have any of our explosive 1-drops. Alright, I guess we'll keep this one. And yeah, Freebooter goes nicely with double Meddling Mage, so we'll keep that one on top. And turn 1 Goblin Guide is not gonna find us a land, but luckily we have a pretty painless mana base for this game. So let's name Human, play Vial, and we'll need to get on the board quickly here to prevent taking too much damage from the Goblin Guide. Alright, they're on Black-Red Burn, double Goblin Guide, plus bolts. Alright, and we did not find any lands with those triggers. Instead another Aether Vial. I think I'm fine playing the Freebooter. And their hand is Claim to Fame and 2 Bloodstainmires. That's beatable, for sure. Next turn we can play Meddling Mage, Violin Lieutenant to stop the guides, so we'll be at 7 essentially. And Mantis Rider on top. And our opponent gets the Stomping Ground. Alright, so we can play Meddling Mage and then Violin the Lieutenant. And what should we name with the Meddling Mage? I guess the card I'm most afraid of is Searing Blaze here. So I guess I'll name Searing Blaze and say go. And now we have 2 good blockers thanks to our Lieutenant. There's an Arid Mesa, so we know they still have the Bloodstained Mire in hand. So they probably should have played the other fetch land. The Guides attack. Let's see what they reveal. Noble Hierarch. Alright. Time to Violin Lieutenant. Suppose we should have blocked first before Violin the Lieutenant, since we're gonna block anyways, and now we give them the opportunity to maybe kill one of our creatures. So got a little too hasty here. Should assign blockers first. Alright, that works. And the follow-up is an Eidolon. Don't really care too much about Eidolon, thanks to our Vial. And we're gonna turn the corner pretty quickly here. I think we just Violin, Mantis Rider, and attack with everyone probably. I'm fine trading Lieutenant for Eidolon, and we still have the Mantis Rider back to block, so I don't think we want to play anything into the Eidolon. Should have lethal next turn, and I don't imagine our opponent can top deck their way out of this with one draw. Alright, so we're up against Claim to Fame Burn, so that probably indicates that they have the 4/3 Devil that can deal 4 damage to us. So against Burn, clearly we want Auriok Champions. Darfleet Daredevil's also good. And could also make a case for Sin Collector. What don't we want against Burn? Reflector Mage can be a little slow, so I can see cutting some Reflector Mages. Bugler can also be slow, but it is a pretty effective card in the matchup. I guess I can see cutting 2 Mages, and then maybe 1 Bugler, since this matchup isn't really about grinding card advantage more than trying to kill the opponent quickly, but at least Sin Collector can potentially prevent 3 damage or more. So I think this is probably okay. And yep, this looks like a keep to me. It's a 1-lander with Vial, but we'd also have the Hierarch. We did see our opponent had access to green mana, so they could have brought in potential answers to Vial, but usually don't expect those out of Burn, and Auriok Champion, definitely a good draw. So I think we want to lead with our Vial, and then next turn we can put the Noble into play with our Vial, and hope to draw a second land. And bump in the Knight, alright. Swiftspear gets in for 2. Put a counter on Vial, and hope to draw land. If we draw land here, then I like our chances quite a bit. If we don't, then we could be in trouble. Found a Sin Collector instead. Alright, so we're in a bit of trouble now. Do get to put a Noble into play end of turn, but not getting the Auriok Champion down this turn definitely hurts. Alright, we only took 1, that's reasonable. End of turn, activate Vial. Put in Noble, hope it survives. Nope. Might be a Searing Blaze here. Yep. Alright, at least we didn't make them trigger prowess. So we saved ourselves 1 point. Put Vial to 2, still hoping for a land here. Instead of Thalia's Lieutenant. Alright, probably just saying go, and then vialing in the Auriok Champion to block the Swiftspear. Could get owned by a Skullcrack, which does prevent protection from working for a turn, but I think we still have to go for it here. A lot of burn decks are also shaving on the number of Skullcracks they play, so it's not super likely that they have it. Alright, so no Skullcrack, that's good. And we get to untap. Alright, I think we keep Violet 2 for now, since we only have the 1/3 drop. Alright, so what are the options? Phantasmal Image copying Champion seems pretty appealing here, so I'm fine saying go. And then keeping up Vial on Phantasmal Image. And if our opponent plays a creature, we want to respond so that we can copy the champion and gain more life from a creature entering the battlefield. Alright, so we're up to 13, and we've got 2 nice blockers. And Vial makes it so we don't have to take any damage from the Eidolon. Alright, let's keep the Vial on 2 for now, I think. Alright, I drew the land finally, so I think we want to play Lieutenant. And then with the ability on the stack, we can Vial in the Freebooter, so it still receives the +1/+1 counter. And the Lieutenant still grows. And our opponent scoops it up. Alright, so Auriok Champion, pretty good against Burn as it turns out. I want to thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this gameplay, and as always, have a nice day. I also want to thank all my patrons for supporting the channel, and you can do so yourself as well over at patreon.com/LegenVD, where you get cool rewards for supporting the channel, as well as getting us closer to our goals, where with every goal reached, we will release an additional weekly series. So if you want to see more content, Patreon is the place to go.